What is going on, guys? It is MurderInc here, back with another Raid Shadow Legends video, and today we're going to be talking about the biggest roadblock in the entirety of Raid Shadow Legends. Now, how did I come to this decision, picking this task? Pretty simple. I went based off of the analytics. If you remember, they did a year-end recap report. They showed the most common champions. Those were a lot of very early game champions, so that is what led me to come to the conclusion that Faction Wars is going to be that biggest roadblock in this game, based on how hard it is, the requirements for it, on top of how good the rewards are. So the first thing, of course, the reward system: swift parry, deflection, resilience, perception gear available from those Faction War crypts, with perception being absolutely outstanding. And of course, you do have the option of getting swift parry, but not in a big enough bulk to really matter and really change your account unless you get extremely lucky or you're pushing platinum, which is so few players it's not even worth talking about. So with that being said, we're going to be talking about the hardest crypt in the game. So this is a really difficult question. It's going to change based on a lot of things. Some people might pull 5 legendaries in one faction that's considered very difficult, and they're going to fly through it no problem. However, we're looking at the big picture here. We're looking at the overall picture, and it's going to come down to the champions you can get for free and the champion pool available to you, and how many factions need key roles that are very hard to get within. So High Elves is the obvious one. This is going to be the easiest one. You get Arbiter, you can just wait until you get Arbiter. We have Apothecary here, Elaine, lots of good champions, and overall I think the difficulty of this one is one of the easiest. The easiest is probably going to be Barbarians. Syl of the Drakes is such an incredible carry. She can almost solo Faction Wars, which is pretty incredible. And when I say solo, I am talking about stage 21, of course. And they also have a great pool of epic champions as well. Can be paired with someone like a High Khatun you also get for free. But instead of going over each and every faction, I'm going to go over the hardest factions you can face and then come to the conclusion of who is indeed the hardest. So after looking at all of these faction banners here, I narrowed it down to the hardest 3, which is going to be Demonspawn, Knight Revenant, and Orc. Now, first starting with Orc, I elected to remove this from the list. Not so much because we have Doom Tower rewards here, because like I said, based on the analytics, a lot of players aren't even making it to Doom Tower. Faction Wars is going to be available to players from when they start the game to whenever they quit, whether it's 60 days in, 90 days in. So I had to look at the epics, I had to look at the legendaries you could pull. I didn't put too much stock into the legendaries because they were fusions like Iron Brago that would make this a lot easier, but there's a lot of really good tools here and it's evenly spread throughout the faction. As far as the different epics you can use, one of them being Shaman, of course, who you do get for free, and was the most used champion, which I thought was funny when we did see the final year-end report in analytics for Raid, just showing how low the retention for this game is in fact. So between Shaman and 2 very recent fusion champions being Tuhak and Tolf, this is going to have to be number 3 for the hardest faction to complete, all the way to stage 21 for most people as far as our roadblock goes. The next faction I want to talk about is going to be Demonspawn. This is going to be the second hardest in my opinion, despite having some great new additions to the team like Magnar, who's going to help you guys tremendously. There aren't many carry options from the epic pool specifically, where you can pull one champion here and it will just get you all the way through. Phoenix is very good, however her passive alone isn't enough to keep your entire team alive, because survivability isn't the hardest part of this faction here. So with that being said, champions like Nizana, Tanix, Umbral, Enchantress, definitely a power 3 for this faction. Allure is also very strong. I've seen people using 3 Allure or 2 Allure to get through this faction. That's not as realistic, needing a dupe of an epic. Regardless of how common it may seem to most people who get frustrated and pull them over and over again, isn't really going to cut it. So with that fact, and even though you can get Drexstar in a very long time of doing 3v3 arena, everyone's favorite part of this game, I'm going to put this as the second hardest faction to beat overall, based on the boss mechanics, the champions that are in the wave, so on and so forth. So giving your guys feedback on this one, I was kind of 50-50 on this faction, because most of these crypts have been nerfed 1, 2, or 3 times since I've completed it. However, I am basing it off of the service I do offer, where I do complete Faction Wars for players, and this is a very common one, as well as our number 1 pick, which is going to be Knight Revenant. This is one of the most asked about and requested Faction Wars from people for me to complete all the way to stage 21, and it's definitely going to take the number 1 spot on the list. Now yes, there are many combinations of champions you can get as far as survivability goes, however the main issue here is damage. The number one damage dealer is going to be Faceless. If you don't have him, it's going to be extremely difficult to get through this faction. One way to get around it with Faceless, Whisper is definitely a good option. And as far as legendary goes, Tomb Lord is the number one legendary carry for this faction. Now if you're insanely lucky and have Hegemon, you can also use him to great success. But I really don't want to use any void legendaries when talking about this faction because it's such a small chance and it's going to be relevant to so few players. It doesn't seem to be worth bringing up. Now yes, Mother Cybele is someone new. She was available for people to get. However, as I did just mention, survivability isn't as big of a deal for this boss as straight up damage is. If you guys know how this boss works, you have to kill it in a certain amount of turns before it regains all of its health, and it's going to be a cycle that repeats over and over again. And if you fail it, I believe 2 times, you're going to hit the time limit, you're not going to be able to 3-star it. So as good as Mother Cybele is going to be for the faction crypt and survivability, if you don't have the damage dealers to back it up, you're not going to have a good time. That on top with the waves of Valkyries you're going to have to face, where it's required to CC them. If you don't have someone, like I said, very lucky account with Hegemon, you're going to have to use a Sinesha and a stun set, Skullcrown and a stun set, anyone to make sure they are not getting off those counterattacks, because those counterattacks do an insane amount of damage in this crypt. So with all of those facts together, that is why I am calling this the biggest roadblock in raid for most players and the hardest faction crypt overall. Now I can definitely see a case for dwarves. There are quite a few ways, whether it's known or unknown, to cheese dwarves using a couple rearguard sergeants, Grizzle Jarl. Now we do have Geomancer as well. Melga of course was introduced recently and it's fantastic. If you were lucky enough to fuse Tormund, Molly and Underpriest Brogni, you're gonna have no problem flying through this faction crypt. But I definitely do remember before all things were nerfed, dwarves, even with the Molly, was considered the hardest faction by a mile. But with all the recent new champions added and where they were added as far as fusions go, I elected to skip this and giving it a ranking in the top 3 for biggest roadblocks in this game as far as the faction wars go. Now as I said before, I can definitely see some major cases being brought up for the other faction crypts. That's kind of where I'm looking for you guys to give your feedback. What other factions do you see in front of you that you can think back or you can currently think about now, where you are in the game saying this faction is going to be really difficult for me? Do you think I'm crazy with the 3 hardest crypts that I picked? Do you think there are other ones like Skinwalkers, Ogre and Tribes? I definitely have my own tricks for this, but I can go over that in a separate video talking about how to beat every single faction crypt if people are interested in that. Outside of that, the only remaining question is when Shadowkin is going to be released. Just how difficult is this going to be? As most people will know, there are 3 types of stage 21 bosses having different abilities. They are color coded. The question is going to be, how hard is this faction going to be since every single player got Ninja? Is Ninja going to be enough to get players through the faction crypt? I personally don't believe so. My account, as we can see, is pretty all set, especially since I just got Genzen here, who I believe is going to be the biggest carry for my entire team. But as we all know, the Shadowkin faction has been out for a very limited amount of time, so to expect players to have enough champions and for there even to be enough champions present here to get so we can actually clear this faction crypt is going to be a story in itself. So one question for you guys to answer right now in the comments is going to be, based on your current faction war progression, whether it's you have everything unlocked and you have Lydia, you're on stage 10 to 15 for all the factions, or if you're on stage, let's say 15 to 20 for all the factions, are you confident that you could get to that same exact point with the amount of Shadowkin that you currently have right now? I would definitely be curious to know. Maybe the answer is no, we need more champions here. We need a few more 2x events with these champions and increased champions in the pool here before people are really going to feel comfortable pushing for that faction war when it does indeed come out. Alright guys, that's going to be my topic today for roadblock in the faction wars. Let me know what you guys think. If you guys want to see an overall faction war video with a breakdown of every single faction, who the key players are for each faction, let me know in the comment section. As always, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to subscribe, like, turn on the notification bell so you don't miss my next video, and I'll see you all in the next upload.